Morning, all you happy people. It is Friday, March 6th, 2026, guys. We are 3 months into the big 226. 2026. We are also now 3 days past the big spooky prophesied doomsday blood moon that happened on Tuesday night to Wednesday. And the sun came up. My car still started. Food still tasted good. I do not believe that doomsday happened. Guess y'all missed it again. Misinterpretation. But have y'all ever heard, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, have you ever heard of history not learned is doomed to repeat? There's a lot of other different versions of it where, circle of life, blah, 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 everything's a big circle, blah, 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 blah. So, I've been doing a lot of studying and stuff like that. The book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament. Jeremiah was a prophet of the Lord, and he was one of the early prophets. Once the Israelites were brought into the promised land, or the land of milk and honey, and they found that this land was not just a big open field somewhere in the middle of nowhere that, God had promised them. No, this was a land with a society and a culture and its own theocracy and everything else like that. And the Israelites promptly came in. They walked around the city walls with the Ark of the Covenant and blew their horns, and the walls turned to dust, and the Israelites came in and they subjugated the people of, I think it was Canaan. Now, because these people had no homeland to call their home, they came in as conquerors to claim this land as their own. Now, this was not like Rome that would come, they'd send their armies in and then police it. No, this was to be a homeland for the Israelites. So basically, somebody came into your house and set up shop the way and, tried to, make your house their house, kind of thing. Claiming that God had told them, this is my house. Kind of a weird situation. But, as such, some of the populace of Canaan, or the Promised Land, did actually flee to other areas and stuff like that. The ones, at least, that were financially capable of doing so. or had relatives in other lands that they could go to and restart. But many of the original populace of the Promised Land did actually stay in the Promised Land. And they, for lack of a better word, they assimilated. Now, this is a very, very, very difficult thing here to say they assimilated. The people of Israel were a theocracy. Their entire hierarchy, their political structure was based on their religion. The law of Moses. Everything, came and went, and major decisions were brought before God. Now, but here's the deal, guys. Whenever you have a rigid theocracy like Judah was, or the Hebrews, or the Jews were, they had spent 40 some odd years totally 100%, 100 million% dependent upon God to feed them, to clothe them, to heal them. They spent 40 years. They spent an entire generation watching and witnessing and worshiping God and only God. Now they come into this country with their laws, their rituals, their rites, their temples, and their sacrifices and everything else like that. And they come into a land that has its own political views and theocracy. And unfortunately for the Jews, and this seems to be the way of the Jews, they found it easier to incorporate some of the original pagan worship into their own theology, to the point where once the first temple was built, they put a pagan symbol, image or idol inside of the Holy of Holies. God, we all know, is a very jealous God. 10 Commandments, number 1, have no graven image and no gods before me. That's number 1, guys. And they decided to put a graven image inside of the Holy of Holies, where God himself sits. And that graven image sat in that Holy of Holies recorded for 50 years, guys. And for 50 years, God did not enter the Holy of Holies. And God, unfortunately with the Jews, that's as recorded, is, when God wasn't, constantly, in their presence and making himself known, the Jews were like goldfish. They only had a 3-second memory. Oh, God's not here. Oh, well, we can just do what we want to now. No. So they started pagan worshiping, and they started incorporating pagan worshiping and rituals with their own stuff, because they saw, The original owners of the land, they would do things a certain way, and they say, well, that must work. So it's not God's way, but it must work for this place here. So let's go ahead and incorporate that. Blah, 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 blah. Now, God did not like this. God did not like this a lot. And it's recorded a lot of times where, God had to smite man for being, dumbasses. That's where the flood came. That's where Sodom and Gomorrah came. Well, also the Babylonians coming and basically conquering Israel, destroying the temple, and basically just casting the Hebrew people to the four winds, as well as enslaving some of them. And God wanted this to happen because he needed the people to be basically smote and then come back to God. Now, why am I talking about all this crap? Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, do we not see parallels in today's day and age? Before Jesus was born, the Roman Empire conquered and occupied Jerusalem. For 30 years, Jesus dwelt amongst the Jews as well as the Romans. And then 30 years after Jesus' death, the Romans came in and destroyed the temple. Now, there are some theologians that said it's because God gave the Jewish people one generation, 30 years, to embrace Christianity, the new covenant, the New Testament, the new way of doing things. The temple was destroyed so that the normal rites and sacrifices and everything else like that would not happen, would no longer happen. Basically, 30 years after Jesus was crucified, the Jewish people were no longer the chosen people. Because they could not perform all the duties that were given to them by the Mosaic covenant. Because Jesus came in with a new covenant. So, but Jesus also said that, and he actually followed all of the laws of Moses, the feasts and stuff like that, what to do, how to dress, stuff like that. But Jesus never made sacrifice at the temple. At least none recorded. Because Jesus was the last sacrifice that God needed to finally forgive man of its sins. Now let's see if y'all understand this craziness. The country, the dictatorship that was the Roman Empire, that not only crucified our Lord and Savior, no, don't get me wrong, it had to be done, but the country that did it, Same with, um, Jesus had to be betrayed and everything else like that. All that stuff actually had to happen. But the country that actually did it, much like John, not John the Baptist, Paul, a person who hunted down and tortured and killed Jews in his lifetime became an apostle, a post-crucifixion apostle, which I'm still a little up in the air on, but he did write a large portion of the New Testament in our Bible. But that same country, much like Paul, converted to Christianity. And once it became Christian, it flipped the script, and now pretty much any other religion other than Christianity was now illegal. So yes, it was a 100% flip. Every other religion was legal before, and then Christianity was the only illegal. Now Christianity is the only legal, and everything else was. Because I'll tell you, during the Spanish Inquisition, a large portion of the Edituve was trying to convert the Jewish faith. Yeah, there you go. And the Spanish Inquisition was, brought forth with the okay from the Pope. But let me ask you guys, you've got a country that basically worshipped its dictators as gods. It was even written on their money. Then flips the script, turns from a democratic democratic dictatorship empire to a theocratical dogmatic entity, where not only now it's no longer an emperor, it's a pope. And there are at least half a dozen to a dozen written testimonies from popes that they were God or gods. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the book of Jeremiah tells us that we need to worship what's in the book, not what the world tells us. Yes, we need to follow the law, the law of the land. Don't speed, don't steal, don't commit murder and stuff like that, and this, that, and the other. But we are to follow God's commandment first. Fortunately, America was in many of its laws and its society are built on a Christian and the laws of Moses, the books of Numbers and Deuteronomy and Leviticus. That all is the basis of what's in the Library of Congress in our congressional laws. Even our penal system, local, is based on Mosaic law. So we can work within that. The law of the land reflects that. But what I'm getting at, guys, is we have integrated with the approval of religious leaders, guys, the Pope and insert name here, religious leaders have allowed us to water down the resurrection, the crucifixion and the resurrection, to bunnies and colored eggs and chocolate and stuff like that, and spring solstice and stuff, and not the most precious and amazing thing that ever happened, the final sacrifice that God needed to finally save us as humans and welcome us into his host. The crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Christmas, although aptly named Christmas, is now, instead of a glorious day to remember, the birth of Jesus Christ, which, crazy enough, guys, the Bible and everything, it records that we're not really supposed to celebrate Christmas. His birth, though miraculous as it is 1,000,000% second fiddle to his death and resurrection in terms of what it actually accomplished, guys. His birth was just a fulfillment of prophecy. And then you've got Halloween. How many churches celebrate a version of it called Truck or Treat, using a pagan ritual? Now, they are using a pagan ritual to get families to come onto the campuses of churches, guys. Which, it's kind of like wiggling a worm in front of a bass, guys. It gets you a fish, but did you really have to, did you really do it the right way? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, God is a jealous God. And he allowed his chosen people to be basically decimated, cast to the four winds, enslaved, insert atrocity here, and not to be brought back together again for several generations, guys. During this time, while in the book of Jeremiah, Baal worship was a big thing, guys. Killing babies. They put altars and stuff in high places. And just really messed up, guys. This world is no better off now, guys. We've got babies being killed in the millions by Planned Parenthood. And and we don't even know if they do, but just because it's not a cave in the side of a hill with a goat-faced demon in the middle of a fire and they're not throwing babies in there, that doesn't mean it's not Baal worship. We've got the Epstein files released where we've got celebrities not only doing the adrenochrome, but they're actually eating babies, guys. I saw a report that Ellen DeGeneres was probably one of the most prolific baby eaters out there. As far as I know, she's still got a talk show. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, if we do not fix this, God's not going to send an army to destroy us and cast us to four winds. Well, then again, he might anyway. But you got to understand, guys, that we are treading the path that the Jewish people tread thousands of years ago, many, many times, and we have lost our way. We need to get back on the path, or else we will be cast to the four winds. Let's roll.